Good afternoon. Welcome back to the hearing. My apologies for the late start. We had to push back the start of the afternoon session to 2 p.m. because some members of the committee could not finish their engagements by 1 p.m. Anyway, welcome back. Could the clerk please call the next witnesses? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For the record, could you please state your names and the positions that you hold in your organization? We'll start from Jeff.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Payne. I'm the Managing Director for Asia Internet Coalition.
Good afternoon. I'm Simon Milner. I'm Vice President of Public Policy for Facebook in Asia Pacific.
Good afternoon. My name is Alvin Tan, and I'm the Head of Public Policy for Facebook in Southeast Asia.
Good afternoon. I'm Philip Chua. I'm a Global Lead for Government Elections at Twitter.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Reen. I'm Director of Public Policy and Philanthropy for Twitter in Asia Pacific.
Good afternoon. My name is Irene J. Liu, and I'm the News Lab Lead for Google.
Welcome. The evidence that you'll be giving today before the committee will be taken on oath. If you so desire, you can take an affirmation. Clerk, please administer the oath.
I will take the oath first, and after the oath is taken, I will administer the affirmation. Now, will witnesses taking the oath, please hold the Bible in your left hand, raise your right hand. You have the copy of the oath with you. Please recite the oath together.
I, Irene J. Liu, swear that the evidence which I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Those taking the affirmation, please raise your right hand. Please recite the affirmation together.
I, Philip Chua, do solemnly, sincerely, and truly declare and affirm that the evidence which I shall give before this committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Witnesses, please be seated. Welcome to the public hearing on the Select Committee on Deliberate Online Falsehoods. The focus of today's evidence gathering session is for us to put questions to you. You have taken a solemn obligation to answer our questions truthfully. I will now call on Mr. Shanmugam to ask his questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here and for your written representations. You know what the purpose of this select committee is. We are exploring the risks, the ways in which deliberate online falsehoods are spread, and we are primarily restricting ourselves to deliberate online falsehoods. We call them DOFs, and what we should do about the situation. So I think it's useful to be clear about the approach we are going to take in these discussions. We see you, the entire panel, as people who enable communications, and technology enables communications. It has brought immense benefits. It has revolutionized societies. It has given more freedom to people. And at the same time, there are some issues. And we see you as partners in trying to deal with those issues. So I'll start with Facebook. Mr. Milner, Mr. Tan, thank you for being here. You have shared our concerns and commitments to achieve these goals. So if I could invite you to look at your written representation of the 2nd of March. I think you say there quite clearly what you see your obligations as, and a commitment which you share with us. You say so. And at page 2, you say that it's a shared responsibility and you take it seriously. I think that's not controversial. I would like to start by discussing with Facebook some elements of your philosophy generally. And I think what I say would apply to the others as well. And if you disagree at any point, please feel free to jump in and give us your views. Okay, I think as a major internet company, Mr. Milner and Mr. Tan, Facebook has provided a platform for at least a couple of billion people more. And it has made its commitment to transparency. So if I can invite you to look at some documents, they will be shown on the screen. Your commitment to the Facebook community, 30th of November 2011, you have said, I think there's something wrong with this site. Let me, in the interest of time, read it out to you. Facebook has always been committed to being transparent about the information you have stored with us, and we have led Internet in building tools to give people the ability to see and control what they share. But we can also always do better. I'm committed to making Facebook the leader in transparency and control around privacy. Then, May 11th, 2012, Facebook News, title Enhancing Transparency in Our Data Use Policy. When we launched our redesigned data use policy last year, our goal was to create a more transparent guide to how we use data when people use Facebook. And third, Facebook News, in December 18 last year, 2017, we believe that sharing information about IP reports we receive from rights holders is an important step towards being more open and clear about how we protect the people and businesses that use our service. Publishing this report reinforces our important commitment to transparency as we build community and bring the world closer together. And May 15th of last year, in an article in Marketing Week, it refers to statements made by Ms. Mendelsohn. Mendelsohn used her speech to claim that being open is one of Facebook's 5 core pillars, and that it's striving to be the most open and transparent company about our own metrics. We take this commitment to being open and transparent very seriously. We are committed to providing the tools and partnerships to make that possible for all advertisers. Openness is not something we switch on in good times and off in the bad. If anything, it is even more important to have it when things are perhaps not going so well. That sets out your position and some of your core principles, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And you are now before this Parliamentary Select Committee representing the people of this country, and this is a serious discussion. And would you agree to make progress, we need to be full, frank, and honest?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Milner, I think you have gone to several parliaments around the world to give evidence, among them the UK Parliament as well as the Israeli Knesset.
This may be number 4, I think.
Thank you.
My countries.
Can I refer to a statement that was issued on the 16th of March? You probably have spent some time looking at this. It's just a few days ago. In 2015, we learned that a psychology professor at the University of Cambridge named Dr. Kogan lied to us and violated our platform policies by passing data from an app that was using Facebook login to SCOL Cambridge Analytica, a firm that does political, government, and military work around the globe, and approximately 270,000 people downloaded the app. Now, there is an article in The Guardian, which I'm sure you're aware of, but we will flash it anyway, 18th of March, which makes a claim that between June and August of 2014, more than 50 million Facebook profiles were harvested by Cambridge Analytica. And your CEO, I think last night, this morning Singapore time, said about 300,000 people. The app was installed by around 300,000 people who shared their data as well as their friends' data. And given the way our platform worked at this time, meant that Kogan was able to access tens of millions of their friends' data. I think all of this is factual. Yes, you've got to say yes so that we have the transcript.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Now, Facebook knew about this breach in 2015, that at least 270,000 users and tens of millions of their friends, their data had been given to Cambridge Analytica without permission, in clear violation of the rules. Correct?
In clear violation of our terms, yes.
Yes. I would like to understand how this breach occurred. Dr. Cohen had developed an app. Facebook users downloaded the app. Their data and data relating to their friends were then accessible to Dr. Kogan. So far, we are within Facebook's policies and rules, correct?
At the time, yes.
Yes. And at the time, you work on the basis that the Facebook users who downloaded the app agreed to harvesting of their information by Dr. Kogan.
I think
at that time.
I wouldn't necessarily, the word harvesting did not appear in our terms, nor did it appear in the terms that the people would see as they agreed to access that app and make use of its features.
What term would you use?
I would have to come back to you on exactly that term, but the word harvest is a colloquialism that's been used in some of the reporting on it.
Right.
Not to suggest that this is not problematic, but that's not a term that was
Well,
used.
it's a term that,
in
well, would you describe that the data was accessible to and used by Dr. Kogan?
Yes, we've been clear about that. But just to be clear, this isn't all data that had been shared by their friends. It's certain features of their data that was available.
Mr. Milner, we can spend a lot of time discussing small details. I think you understand the essence of the point.
I do understand the essence.
Thank you. Dr. Kogan then passed that information to Cambridge Analytica.
Yes, and it's in doing that he very clearly breached our terms, and that's why we acted as we did.
Right. Can I now refer you to some answers you gave to the British Parliament in their select committee? This was on the 8th of February to the Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee. Can we look at question 447? Mr. Matheson asked you, well, let's see how we get on with the questions, and if you are able to answer them, have you ever passed any user information over to Cambridge Analytica or any of its associated companies? And the answer was no. We then go on to question 448. But they do hold a large chunk of Facebook's user data, don't they? No, they may have lots of data, but it will not be Facebook user data. It may be data about people who are on Facebook that they have gathered themselves, but it's not data that we have provided. And question 473. The chair says, we have a session later on with some of the news media organizations, so I'm sure we'll be able to ask them about that too. I just have a couple of clarification questions I want to ask before we finish. Going back to the discussion on Facebook developers, Mr. Milner, you said it was not true that developers had Facebook user data, but they had data about people on Facebook. I just wondered what the difference was between these two things. I suppose I was initially assuming that Mr. Matheson was saying, have you provided data? Has Facebook provided data to Cambridge Analytica or some other outside entity? We do not provide your data to anyone without your permission, but the developer, the system that Ms. Bickett was talking about, does allow people to decide, I'm prepared to let them have some of my Facebook data in order to get a service from them. Mr. Milner, would you agree that you are being very careful and economical with the truth in giving these answers?
No, I would not. Can I explain why?
Sure.
On the basis of what I understood to be true at the time, I believe my answers were entirely accurate, in that we have never provided data to Cambridge Analytica, and we understood at the time that because of the undertakings that Cambridge Analytica had given to us, including sworn legal affidavits, that they had no Facebook data. And indeed, subsequent to this, and you may want to refer to this, their CEO appeared before exactly that same committee and said they did not have Facebook data.
I have referred to that, or at least I have looked at it. Let's explore that a little bit, Mr. Milner. Cambridge Analytica obtained the Facebook user data. It was a large chunk, as we now know. And I'll remind you on question 458 again. Can we have that? The question was, a large chunk was with them. And in question 473, you draw a distinction between what Facebook provides and what the app developers obtain themselves, focused on Cambridge Analytica. Now, that's why I said you were being very careful and economical with the truth. You were trying to answer a very precise question while you knew, the facts you knew were that a large amount of data had been accessed in breach of your rules. You knew that at that time. Whether they still had it or not is irrelevant for the time being.
Actually, I think it was highly relevant to the question that was being asked by Mr.
Can I
Matheson.
finish my question?
Of course, I apologize.
Yes. First point is, on the 8th of February, when you gave evidence to the select committee, you knew that a large amount of data had been accessed by Cambridge Analytica in breach of your rules and policies. The question was, did you give any information to Cambridge Analytica? Can I suggest to you, in the context of being full, frank, and honest, which you said you had to be with us, and I'm sure you offer the same courtesy to the UK Parliament, one would have then said, we did not give it. But you know what? In breach of our policies, a large amount of data had in fact been accessed by Cambridge Analytica. Can I suggest to you that would have been a full, frank, and honest answer?
I agree with you that with hindsight,
Thank you.
I could have explained more, but just to be clear,
Let me
I did
just stop
answer
you there.
accurately.
Let me just
could I
stop you
finish
there.
my answer in the same way I asked you to?
Let me ask you
finish
another
your
question, and then you can carry on. So with hindsight, you agree with me. What has changed between then and now that you feel that this is the answer that should have been given to the British Parliament on the 8th of February?
I'm merely explaining that I feel it's unfortunate that yourself and members of that committee feel that I was in any way economical. I felt that at the time I was giving truthful answers to questions, which actually this was a minor part of a broader hearing in which we covered lots of other issues. And therefore, of course, now with hindsight, especially given recent events, I wish I had said more, but at the time, and especially given the evidence we then heard from Mr. Nix to that same committee within a couple of weeks, it felt like actually things were wrapped up. It's really only the events of the last few days and the things that have come to light in terms of these investigations, which are still allegations to be investigated now by the Information Commissioner in the UK, then I wish perhaps I'd said more. But what I said was what I knew to be true at the time. And that's exactly what I'm also going to share with this committee today.
Mr. Milner, let's just be quite direct here. There was no excuse for not giving this information on the 8th of February.
I'm not trying to make excuses, and if you feel that I am,
No, I'm asking for your comment. I'm suggesting to you that there was no excuse for not telling the whole truth and being full, frank, and honest on the 8th of February. Would you agree?
Often in committees, rather like this one,
No,
people
I would
want
like a
short
yes or no
answers.
answer.
People want short answers rather than long ones. I gave a truthful answer to the committee. All my answers were true, as were those of Ms. Bickett, based on what we knew then. And I'm here today and happy to answer your questions about what we know now and also what we don't know yet. And that's hence the investigation.
You just didn't answer my question.
I feel I have answered your question.
Well, let me put it to you again. There is no excuse for you not to have been full, frank, and honest on the 8th of February with the UK Parliament.
I was frank and honest with that committee. I could have provided a fuller answer, but I do think it's unfair to suggest that there was no excuse. There were good reasons based on the range of issues being discussed in that committee as to why we didn't go into more detail at the time.
Let me understand. The reason why you are not full and reason why you did not give a complete answer was because this was a minor part of the entire discussion?
No, it's because the committee were particularly interested in whether Cambridge Analytica had Facebook data now and whether it was relevant during the 2016 presidential election in the US. Based on what I understood to be true, which is that Cambridge Analytica had no Facebook data, and because we had a sworn affidavit to that effect from them, I didn't feel it was necessary to go into that level of detail. But everything I said to the committee was true based on what I understood to be the time, and it may still be true.
Mr. Milner, we can have very long answers. I'm prepared to let you answer as long as you like, but there is little purpose in repeating the same thing over and over again about what you knew. We all know what you knew. I had a very specific question. One of your reasons for not being full and frank with this UK Select Committee, which you gave to us, is that this was a minor part of the hearing, which covered a lot of other issues, correct?
I think I said it was one of many issues.
Let me quote you your exact words. This was a minor part of a broader hearing in which we covered lots of other issues.
Okay, I
Do you
stand by what I said.
that answer?
I stand by what I said.
So the breach and loss of 50 million or breach of your regulations leading to unlawful access of data relating to 50 million users, in your view, is a minor issue?
No, the committee hearing was all about fake news, like this one. There were lots of other questions.
Let me ask you a further
Only one
question.
committee member asked me about this, and there were as many more members than there are here asked me questions about a range of other issues. I suggest if one committee member asked questions about something, it's reasonable to suggest that was a minor part of a much broader hearing.
I come back to my question. I'm quite happy, Mr. Milner, to ask you the question as many times as you wish. In your view, was this question not answered fully because it was a minor part of the entire proceedings?
No, I think as I've explained, but I do feel I'm repeating myself. I wish, of course, I'd explained more, but and now the committee that committee has asked for Facebook to come and make further representations.
We are now exploring the reasons. Would you like to amend your answer that it was a minor part, and that's really not a good reason for not having been full and frank with the committee?
I'm happy to explain. This was one of many questions that I was asked about the issue of fake news and what Facebook was doing about it.
Right.
As with, and often committees are looking for short answers so they can and ask questions of other witnesses as well. And do I wish I'd given a fuller answer? Yes.
Right. Now, would you agree that every question asked by the members requires full and proper answers?
I'd be interested in your own definition of what full means.
Right.
Especially when you want to try to get through lots of issues.
Let's take this, for example. The members of the Select Committee were interested, more than one, because they came back to this question a number of times, as to whether any data had been given by you, whether there's been any breach of privacy, and whether in some way data had been accessed. Facebook users' data had been accessed.
Actually, I don't recall there being any questions about there being a breach of privacy.
Well, they didn't specifically use the word privacy. You obviously know the notes very well, and so do I. But that was the issue they were dealing with, even though they didn't say privacy, amongst other issues. So the questions were related to Cambridge Analytica, whether they had accessed information, and there were concerns. A full answer, in my view, and I think you've accepted it, answer to the questions would have been, we did not give the information to Cambridge Analytica, but a developer whose app 270,000 people downloaded allowed him to access data for 50 million users, and that did end up with Cambridge Analytica. And you know what? We took steps to ask them to confirm that they no longer have that data. That would have been a full, frank, and honest answer.
I respect your view on that, and as I think I've been clear about, with hindsight, I could have said more, but the answers I gave were true based on what I knew to be true at the time.
Based on what you needed to be true?
No, what I knew to be true at the time. Not what I needed to be true, what I knew to be true.
What you knew to be true.
Correct.
Your answers are not very consistent. If necessary, we'll come back to that in a minute.
I believe they are, but I'm happy to come back to it if you wish.
You're obviously aware of Mr. Zuckerberg's comments last night on his
I am.
Facebook. Right. Let's look at them.
Sure.
He says, we have a responsibility to protect your data, and if we can't, then we don't deserve to serve you. I've been working to understand exactly what happened and how to make sure this doesn't happen again. The good news is that the most important actions to prevent this from happening again today, we have already taken years ago. And then again, later on, there was a breach of trust between Kogan, Cambridge Analytica, and Facebook. But it was also a breach of trust between Facebook and the people who share their data with us and expect us to protect it. And I'm sure you're aware of what Ms. Sandberg has said. If I can show that to you, again last night. Sharing Mark's post addressing the Cambridge Analytica news, as he said, we know that this was a major violation of people's trust, and I deeply regret that we didn't do enough to deal with it. We have a responsibility to protect your data, and if we can't, then we don't deserve to serve you. And the last paragraph there, you deserve to have your information protected. Sorry, can you go back to Ms. Sandberg's? Yeah, and we'll keep working to make sure you feel safe on Facebook. Your trust is at the core of our service. We know that and will work to earn it. So there is an acceptance that this was a major breach of trust by Facebook. Yes? And the user's trust is at the core of Facebook's services. Yes?
Yes, that's right.
And users deserve to have their information protected. Yes?
Yes.
And when that trust is breached, the company should be transparent.
That's what we said, and indeed we've committed that we will communicate with all the people who are affected by this.
And it should be open?
By open, what do you mean? In terms of we will, because we shouldn't share with other people, it would be the people that have been directly impacted, we will let them
You should be
know.
open with them.
Yes.
And you should be open with the public that a breach has occurred.
That a breach of trust has occurred.
Yes. And not play verbal games?
Sorry?
Not play verbal games?
I'm not sure I follow you.
I'm sure you do.
Where you're driving. I'm not sure I do. Can you explain further?
This is going to be interesting. There is, when one says full, frank, and honest, and transparent, and a duty to be open, and a duty to tell the users, then you do that, and you don't try and fob off those responsibilities.
I strongly suggest that that what our CEO has said today, and the quotes as well that you've got there from our COO, Sheryl Sandberg, in no way do they suggest we're
I'm not
trying
suggesting them. I haven't
finished.
suggested them.
I hadn't finished.
So I wasn't suggesting anything about Mr. Zuckerberg or Ms. Sandberg.
So are you suggesting that I am somehow fobbing
Well,
off?
I'm asking you a general question that one...
Please ask a hard question.
Well, yes, there will be hard questions.
Good.
I start with a general question. Having established that there needs to be trust, that there needs to be openness, that there needs to be transparency, would you agree that when one comes across an instance where there's been a breach, one accepts it openly and not try and avoid it by using language which sort of hides what happened? Would you accept that?
When our terms have been breached, we owe it to people to let them know if they're affected by it, correct?
Thank you. Now, let's look at question 474 again. To the UK Parliament. Now, given what I've just taken you through about being open and frank and honest, what do you think the answer to that question should be if you're asked the question today?
Question 474.
Yes.
Can we just read it out? Shall I read it, or would you like to?
You can read it out.
So I just want to be clear what you meant, because it was not clear at the time. A Facebook developer then has gathered data about Facebook users because they have interacted with the tools that they have created on the platform. If that Facebook user then decides to leave Facebook, does the developer keep the data that they have gathered? My colleague Monica Bickett, who is our VP for product policies globally, said, no, that is in our policies. They actually have to delete the data once that person is no longer using the service. I would also note that you do not have to leave Facebook to make that decision. If you have interacted with an app on Facebook and you decide, I don't want to do that anymore, you can go to your settings on Facebook and turn that off and reject that. Then they have to delete your data.
Right. Now,
that's, yes, in terms of your original question, yes, that's accurate.
In the context of what we know now, and you knew then, where Dr. Kogan had accessed the information and passed it on to Cambridge Analytica, would you answer the question in the same way? Or would you point out that actually a major breach had occurred and there is at least one instance that you know where information was passed on to a third party?
Well, in terms of the question, if Facebook user then decides to leave Facebook, does the developer keep the data that they have gathered? Yes, I think the answer should remain exactly the same. I'm not sure why, because this wasn't specifically about Alexander Kogan or Cambridge Analytica.
You would not think there is a duty to point out that in fact a major breach had occurred and information had passed on?
Not in respect of that question, because that question is about our broad policies and their application for users.
Would you agree in respect of the other questions? You should have given this answer?
I think I've already answered that.
Thank you.
A number of times.
Now, up to yesterday, there was no admission that there was such a major breach, correct?
We have not said, we said there's a major breach of trust.
There was no admission of major breach of trust.
Actually, I would have to go back to Mr. Gruel's post on Friday to see whether or not he used those words. Right. I'm afraid I don't have his newsroom post in front of me to know whether he used exactly those words.
Up to Friday or up to yesterday?
That was on Friday. I would have to, I'm happy to check that out and come back to you unless you have it on your screen.
I do, but let's take it as Friday. Prior to Friday, there's been no admission of any major breach, no public admission, correct?
Of a breach of trust.
Yes, thank you. I know you want to be very careful for
because I know what you're driving towards.
Yes, you don't need to
Why don't we get
anticipate.
there why don't we get there more quickly?
We will get to the questions that I want to ask, Mr.
I'm sorry, that was disrespectful. I apologize.
Now, you are aware of the letter from Mr. Collins.
To Mark Zuckerberg?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
committee has repeatedly asked Facebook about how companies acquire and hold on to user data from their site, and in particular about whether data had been taken without their consent. Your officials' answers have consistently understated this risk and have been misleading to the committee. Do you accept that?
Well, evidently, based on what I've already said, I don't. But I do understand why Mr. Collins is frustrated and why he's asked us to appear again, and we will do so.
Evidently, based on what you've said, that your answers could have been more full, I think Mr. Collins has a right, objectively, to feel that way. Would you agree?
Look, he's his own person. I know Mr. Collins very well, but I don't.
Mr. Milner, please.
But could I just?
I have a question.
You've made a very clear allegation. I'd like to respond.
Can I ask this? My questions are designed for a yes or no answer. So give a yes or no, and then you can carry on with your explanations. Let me repeat my question. Go back. Given I read out to you what Mr. Collins' letter says, and I say, given what we have, my apologies. Given what we have said about your answers being more full, I think Mr. Collins has objectively a right to feel that he has been misled. Let me put it that way. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I never misled him.
I didn't say that. I didn't ask that question. I think you're smart enough to know what I'm asking.
I do, but I don't think I can put myself in the shoes of Mr. Collins in the way you suggest.
I'm talking about objective perception.
I think you're as good a judge of that as I am. I'm not going to.
Well,
I do not think I can give you a yes or no answer to that question. That's for Mr. Collins.
Let's try again. Let's try again. I think you're smart enough to know that it is capable of a yes or no answer. Let me explain why. We have your admission that your answers could have been more full. Okay? There is no two ways about it. That's clear. You could have been more full. Mr. Collins has taken the view that you have been misleading to the committee. Just based on that, my suggestion to you is, objectively, anyone looking at those two answers, your statement that you could have been more full, in the context of his questions, I say it's reasonable. I'm not saying you take that view. It's reasonable for someone to come to a conclusion that you have misled the committee. It's a reasonable possibility. Different people may take different views, but it is a reasonable view. Would you agree?
I agree that different people can take different views.
And it is a reasonable view.
I agree that different people can take different views.
I've asked you another question. A reasonable person can take that view.
A reasonable person could take that view.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, again, on the 18th of March. Data has been taken from Facebook users without their consent and was then processed by a third party and used to support their campaigns. Facebook knew about this and the involvement of Cambridge Analytica with it, and deliberately avoided answering straight questions from the committee about it. It is not acceptable that Facebook have previously sent witnesses who seek to avoid answering difficult questions by claiming not to know the answers. This also creates a false reassurance that FB's stated policy is always robust and effectively policed. Just focusing on the first part of what I read out. Facebook knew about this and the involvement of Cambridge Analytica with it, and deliberately avoided answering straight questions from the committee about it. Again, I'm not saying that this is your view, but a reasonable person looking at what has happened could take that view.
With the information we have now, yes, but not at the time.
Right. What is the additional information you have now?
We've had some pretty major media stories which suggested that contrary to the undertakings we were given, individuals and companies, including Cambridge Analytica, retained Facebook data that they told us, legally verified that they had deleted. That was new information which did not come to light, was certainly not available to me or anyone else on February the 8th, only came to light because of the media reports over the weekend.
Why is that material to the answer?
Because Mr. Collins has suggested that I knowingly lied.
Well, he certainly suggests that, but I'm trying to explore your reasons for disagreeing with him.
Can we look at the wording again that he used? Because I think you're suggesting that those words essentially said that somebody knowingly lied or something to that effect. But I don't want to misquote him, so I'd like to see the wording.
We can see that. Facebook knew about this and the involvement of Cambridge Analytica with it, and deliberately avoided answering
the word deliberately misled. I think on the basis, somebody might
I think
conclude that on the basis
deliberately
of what we
avoid
know
it.
now, but not at the time, because we did not know about these stories and these allegations.
Let's just focus on Facebook knew about this and the involvement of Cambridge Analytica with it and deliberately avoided answering straight questions. Let's look at what you knew at that time. You knew that there had been a major breach of your policies.
Of trust and our policies. Yes, a breach of our policies. Correct.
Breach of your policies. You knew that there has been a major breach of trust on your part, right?
Well, we understood that the breach of our policies had been contained. We have said now that actually we should have taken the step of notifying users, and that was a mistake that we made.
Right. So you knew on the 8th of February that there was a major breach of trust on your part.
We knew there'd been a breach of our policies. We did not know that contrary to those undertakings that they apparently, it is alleged, we still don't know for certain, that they
Mr. Milner, you are very, very keen to answer questions which I don't ask. You seem to not be very keen to answering the questions that I do ask. The question I asked was not whether you knew that or you believed that they had been deleted. The question that I asked is, you knew on the 8th of February that there had been a major breach of trust on your part. Do you agree?
We knew there'd been a breach of our policies and that we should have done better by our users.
No, I'm asking a very specific question. You knew that there had been a major breach of trust on your part towards the Facebook users.
I can understand why you'd like a simple yes-no answer. I do think it is more nuanced than you're suggesting.
Well, look.
But this does not mean that we think that, looking back on that, as I've been very clear, I should have provided a fuller answer to the committee and made them more aware of what we understood to be true. And I've recognized that, and I recognize that this is my first opportunity publicly to say it, and I appreciate your questions have enabled me to do that.
Thank you.
But I was not deliberately misleading the committee. I was not trying to be cute with my answers. I genuinely thought I was being helpful in the context of what that committee was looking into at the time, which was about, did Cambridge Analytica have Facebook data now? And my genuine understanding at the time, as was for our company as a whole, was that they did not.
You are probably know this better than I do, but I don't think the UK Parliament asked you a question as to whether Cambridge Analytica had the data with them, but let's not get into that. We're getting into the weeds. Just based on your last answer, I think you'll be prepared, therefore, to agree to the question I first asked you some minutes ago, that Mr. Collins was entitled, and a reasonable person is entitled to take the view that Facebook knew about the breach of its policies and the involvement of Cambridge Analytica in the breach of those policies and deliberately avoided answering straight questions from the committee about it.
No.
He's not entitled to take that view.
Well, you said, sorry, because it was such a long question, I'd rather lost the beginning.
Right.
I agree that he is entitled to take that view, and he clearly has done so.
Now, let's now go to the second part of your long answer which you gave just now, leaving aside Mr. Collins. between what you knew on the 8th of February and what you know now. On the 8th of February, you knew that there had been a major breach of your policies, yes?
We did know there'd been a breach of our policies, yes.
You wouldn't characterize it as major?
I mean, it's not a phrase that we've used, but I'm happy for us to use it in this context, given what has transpired since then and what we are now doing as a company.
What has transpired since then is irrelevant to whether it was major or minor. 50 million Facebook accounts, data, anyone would call it major?
Well, yes. However, it's
Right.
also isn't it also worth pointing out that we were told at the time by Cambridge Analytica, we've never used this
We will
data,
come to
and
that.
we've deleted it.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that. There's a certain logical flow to my questions, I hope. And
Very much so.
it'll be good if we can keep to that and have the questions I ask answered. So let's recap again. On the 8th of February, you knew that there had been a major breach of your policies. You also knew that there was a breach of trust by you towards your users. Would you accept that?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, the only thing that has changed between the 8th of February and today is that there have been some additional reports that Cambridge Analytica actually continue to have this data, correct?
And made extensive use of it.
Right. You don't believe that the first two data points I referred to are enough for you to have been upfront and say, yes, put your hands up and say, sorry, there has been a major breach. Cambridge Analytica accessed our data. We were there is a major breach of trust between us and our Facebook users. You don't think that was enough for you to say that?
I think I've been clear that I wish, with hindsight, I'd given a fuller answer. But just to be clear, that hearing, like this, was about fake news. It was not about data privacy. There was no mention of Alexander Kogan. There was, imagine how long my answer would have had to been to lay out all that into what was a very simple question, which is, have you given your data to Cambridge Analytica? Do Cambridge Analytica have Facebook data? So in answer to those two relatively short, simple questions, I gave short, simple answers. As I've made very clear, in an inquiry which was very broad, and this was only one member asking questions about this, and frankly, it felt like a tangent compared to what the rest of the discussion. If you look at the rest of the proceedings, this was a tangent away from the main purpose of the hearing. I think I've been very clear that with hindsight, would I have preferred to have given longer answers to those questions? Yes.
Mr. Milner, you can take it. You obviously realize I've read the transcripts in some detail. Now, I don't want to extend these proceedings, but really to sit there and give answers like that was a small part of the discussion, somehow suggesting therefore you didn't have the need to be full and frank, or it excuses your answers, doesn't really wash.
I don't think I am making excuses. I'm explaining.
Well, those explanations don't hold any water.
Well, I'm sorry you feel like that.
Yes, I do feel like that.
I'm really sorry you feel like that, because I genuinely am trying to, as per the affirmation I've made, I'm giving you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Right.
And the answers I'm providing to you.
Let's move on to another point. The Facebook did not inform any of the 270,000 users or their friends that the information had been illegitimately accessed, correct?
Well, the 270, no, you're correct.
Thank you. The first time Facebook announced this was last week, more than 2 years after it found out about the breach, correct?
Yes.
Your CEO says at a CNN interview, I regret we didn't do it at the time. I think we got that wrong. You accept that?
Yes, and I've said that already.
And all of this conduct goes against the professed commitments of Facebook. I read those out just now, of being transparent about the information users have stored with Facebook, Facebook being the leader in transparency and control around privacy, being more open and clear about how we protect people and businesses we serve, and to be the most open and transparent company and how user data is protected. Your conduct is contrary to all of these principles, correct, in this instance?
In this instance, yes.
Yes. You did not tell the public. You did not tell the UK Parliamentary Committee. You did not even tell the users whose data had been shared. Quite unacceptable.
I think our CEO's words make it very clear this was a mistake, we got it wrong. But it doesn't mean that the rest of
Would you
but the
accept
rest of
that
those
it's quite
commitments are-
unacceptable?
We've said that. We got it wrong. We should have told people.
Now, these professed commitments seen against your conduct, are they true statements of intention or are they PR verbiage?
They're absolutely a true statement, not just of intention, but of our actions. I can provide plenty of
Well,
information to this committee to demonstrate that.
The best example illustration of statements of intention is actual conduct. So why did you not tell the users whose data was subject of this serious breach?
I wasn't involved in that decision, and I'm afraid I can't.
Well, you've come here
therefore-
to give evidence. I'm asking you, you're representing Facebook.
Yes.
Do you have an answer?
And I'm happy to see if we can provide that information to you, but I don't want, given I wasn't involved in that decision, I think you'd understand why I don't want to speculate.
Well, then I'll have to
about
ask you,
it.
as a reasonable man with some knowledge of Facebook's operations, that there must have been a good reason why there was no public announcement and that users were not informed.
I really would like to be helpful. I don't want to speculate because I was not involved in that decision. I think it'd be wrong for me to speculate.
Right. I'm asking you as a reasonable person, does it look odd to you that users were not contacted and the public were not informed?
It definitely looks like a decision that where we made the wrong call. We should have let people know, and our CEO has owned
Right.
that decision and said we got that wrong.
You would accept that you both have a moral as well as a legal obligation to inform the users?
We wouldn't be admitting that we've breached people's trust if that were not the case.
Thank you.
A moral obligation to do it, you're absolutely correct. As
Now-
I understand it, there was not a legal obligation to do
I
it,
know-
but that's by the by, frankly.
I know that you say that you don't want to speculate, but if you informed the public when you first found out, 2015, or if you told 270,000 users or 50 million whose data had been abused, that would be a huge matter in public, wouldn't it, as it now is?
You may well be right.
And perhaps that was the reason why it wasn't made public.
I think I've been really clear on this. I don't want to speculate about a decision I was not involved in, and I'm happy to investigate that and come back to the committee on it.
Now, how this happened, what Mr. Kogan did could have been done by anyone else, any of the other apps developers, correct?
That's why we've committed to investigating and auditing all apps that were
You see,
operating in
Mr.
that way at
Milner,
the time.
my questions are designed for a yes or no answer. And I'm quite happy for you to explain.
Yes, and
Thank
that's
you.
why we are investigating all apps that were
Thank you.
operational at the time.
Right. Could Facebook have seen that Dr. Kogan was pulling huge amounts of user data off the network?
I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what you mean. In terms of, were we aware of this app and its size? Is that what you mean? Yes,
And
I mean that our systems would have known that was happening. Of course, what we didn't know is what Mr. Kogan was doing.
I know.
Thereafter.
I mean, I say I know, I don't, but I assume that you knew that he was accessing all of this data.
Did we have knowledge? Yes.
Thank you. Did you check and verify that his purposes were legitimate in accessing such a huge amount of data?
I think we've been clear on this in our public statements, which is he signed up to our terms. He agreed to our terms, and that under those terms, he said he was conducting academic research And that information was available and known to us
Right.
and was
So
acceptable within our terms.
Answer to my question is you didn't check. You accepted what he said.
As we do, we were accepting on trust many other developers as well at the time who were, and the purposes of which they're apps, as indeed all app platforms, including operated by others on this panel,
Right.
did at the time, and many still do.
Right. Let's look at another aspect of this, how Facebook reacted when it learned of the breach. 16th of March 2018, your statement says, we are committed to vigorously enforcing our policies to protect people's information. We will take whatever steps are required to see that this happens. That's what you say your commitment is. Let's look at what you did. You removed Dr. Kogan's app, right?
Yes.
You asked Dr. Kogan and Cambridge Analytica to confirm that all information has been deleted.
Yes.
And you found out, according to you, last week, 2 years later, that contrary to the certifications you were given, not all the data was deleted.
That's not quite accurate. We didn't find that out. We now have an allegation.
Okay.
And because of that allegation, we want to investigate.
So you first heard of this allegation last week.
Correct.
And so you're aggressively moving to determine the accuracy of these claims.
Yes.
Now, why wasn't this verified 2 years ago when the certifications were first given?
Well, again, that's something that, of course, with hindsight, we wish we'd done that. And that's one of the lessons for us as to, in terms of why we are now going to audit all other apps and not just take their, what's the word I'm looking for, the affirmation, perhaps for want of a better word, that they have deleted data or have not passed it on. We're now going to audit them.
Mr. Milner, you're dealing with someone who had acted in very serious breach of your rules, Dr. Kogan, according to you, right?
Yes.
And you were completely happy to take his words on trust after that and his certifications without taking any steps to verify yourself?
Well, I think Mr.
No,
Gruel's...
my questions are capable of being answered directly, and then you can explain.
Would you mind repeating the question?
You are dealing with a person, Dr. Kogan, who had already committed a huge breach of your rules. He had accessed a huge amount of data. This was, as you yourself recognized, a serious breach of your trust with your users.
And of our terms.
And of your terms. And you were quite happy to just accept a certification from Dr. Kogan that he is now telling the truth and he has deleted everything.
That was the action we took at the time.
I understand. Do you think it looks odd that you did not take further steps to verify?
With hindsight, yes.
How has time improved your perception of this matter?
Because if we don't know them to be certain, if Mr. Wiley's allegations prove to be correct, then we have been duped. And this has had consequences for potentially millions of our users. And that's a really terrible place for our company to be.
I understand. But again, I think you're smart enough to know the question I really asked. Forget about Mr. Wiley and forget about all the additional data points you now have. Go back to 2 years ago. You have a person who had breached your rules. You have a major breach in your hands. By him and by you, breach of trust to your users. You have all of this. And you are happy to receive a certification from this gentleman and say that, oh, that makes it all right and we trust him. Does that look odd to you?
Actually, I would suggest that you're a lawyer. I would suggest that the kind of verification that we received from him was significantly above and beyond just taking him on trust.
That wasn't the question that I asked. The question I asked is, you were quite happy. Does it look odd to you to just accept a certification from him?
I don't say we were quite happy. That's not the phrase I would use. And it's very clear now that with hindsight, we may have been, It may have been a very bad mistake on our part to have taken that legal, not just his word, but a legal verification that the data had been deleted by him, by Cambridge Analytica, by Mr. Wiley's firm, that it may prove to be that that was a big mistake and we should not have done that.
Mr. Milner, let's leave out the additional information you have received. Let's stick to what you knew prior to these latest allegations. Okay? So let's stick to that. I think you understand my question. Just based on the fact that Dr. Kogan accessed this information and used it contrary to your rules, and we accept it's a major breach, and which also puts you in a major breach of trust situation with your users. Those are the facts. Forget about all the subsequent events. On those facts, your view, can I suggest to you that it looks odd that you did not do anything beyond accepting this certification? Yes or no?
I don't think that question is answerable as a straight yes or no. There is always context. And with hindsight, obviously, yes.
Hindsight, and it doesn't have to really involve these additional allegations. Even without these additional allegations, can I suggest to you that one would have expected a half-competent firm with legal advice to say, we now need to go in there and check whether there is data continuing to remain, because this person has already acted in gross breach. And we ought to now make sure that our users' data is properly protected and therefore deleted. Wouldn't you consider that to be a reasonable course of action?
We clearly should have acted differently at the time.
Now, and you are not a half-competent firm, you're one of the world's most competent firms.
Thank you very much. At the moment, it doesn't feel quite like that.
Well, and therefore the point is, this cannot be an oversight.
Look, we've been really clear. I've been at Facebook for 6 years, and this is one of the worst weeks in my time there. And there have been
I hope I'm not
contributing
to it. Yeah.
I appreciate the effort you clearly put into really understanding the issues and to quizzing me hard about this, and I expected it. We are having to make amends for significant mistakes that were made in the company, and I hope you see from the statement from our CEO overnight and his interview on CNN, there is determination from the very top to figure out what went wrong, to correct it, to learn from it, and to make sure it does not happen again.
So let's then have some clear answers. A reasonable company, when it first came to know about this breach by Dr. Kogan and the fact that information has gotten on to Cambridge Analytica, should have done a few things. It should have notified the users, it should have gone public with what had happened, and it should have taken further steps to ensure that the data had been deleted. Agree?
Agree, we've said all that.
And can you give us a credible, understandable reason why? And what I'm saying is not rocket science. It's fairly basic. I was in practice for over 20 years. It's the first thing lawyers would tell you to do. So can you give us a credible, reasonable, understandable explanation as to why that did not happen? And if you cannot, please say you cannot.
I don't want to speculate.
Thank you. But it seems obvious that if you had done that in 2014 or 2015, the way in which the app developers could access users' data, the fact that there has been such a major breach of privacy, the fact that information has been abused, all of this would have broken out all over Facebook, and Facebook would have had to deal with these public issues. That would have been a natural consequence of any announcement then. Agree? I'm not suggesting that you didn't announce because of that, but I'm just asking you to agree that what is happening now would have happened in 2015.
Actually, I disagree.
Yes.
In that the allegations that have come to light in recent days, I would suggest could be even more serious than the issues of what we did in 2014, 2015, in not notifying people then and not verifying that the data had indeed been deleted. So I'm not sure if that.
I'm afraid
you
are not answering the
I'm not sure.
question. I think we are again talking past each other. The simple point is this. In 2015, if you had made an announcement that there has been a breach, major breach, 300,000 users' data has been abused, 50 million users' data has been abused, it's been passed on, there would have been a number of questions that Facebook would have had to answer in public at that point in time. Agree?
Yes, and we would have said at the time we've had verification from these companies and individuals that they've deleted the data.
Right. And you probably would then have had to say that that's not good enough and we should do more.
I expect, given the way the Information Commissioner in the UK has reacted to recent events and the fact that she has sought a warrant from a court to go in and inspect Cambridge Analytica's data, we may well have been in the same position. It was a different Information Commissioner at the time, but I expect he, Christopher Graham, probably would have taken the same action. So we may have ended up with the same, it may not have been us doing it, it might have been the Information Commissioner, as is what is
Well, we leave out the UK Information Commissioner, we leave out the UK Parliament. I'm focusing on Facebook and what you would have had to do. And I think, given your earlier admissions that your actions were not adequate, the only difference is that we now know in 2018, March, that your actions were not adequate. If you had admitted to all of this in 2015, then we would all know that your actions were not adequate at that point in time, and you would have had to take more actions.
Actually, I'm not sure I agree with you in the sense of if we'd, in 2015, said, hey, this has happened, this is what we've done about it, I think people may have said, well, that's really bad that that happened, but it's good that you are notifying people, and it's good that you're taking action against these companies and exposing them. So I'm not sure I agree that people would then have concluded that our actions were inadequate.
Mr. Milner, you strike me, and I mean this genuinely, as a very smart man. Let me say this to you. In 2015, if you had gone out there and said, Dr. Kogan had accessed 270,000 accounts and another 50 million accounts from there, and a huge amount of data has been abused, and not just by him, but he's passed it on to Cambridge Analytica, and Cambridge Analytica does all these things. And we are now satisfied that neither of them have any information because there is a certification from those two entities. Do you think it's reasonable to think that both the public and the authorities would have asked you, shouldn't you be doing more?
I expect what would have happened then is that people would
please answer the question.
I don't think it's a yes-no answer, Mr. Jammugan. I do think it has to, there is nuance in this answer. And yours is a long question. It's quite hard to answer a long question with a straight yes or no.
It is quite easy. That the
It
public
may be easy,
and the
but
agencies...
it may give the wrong impression that this is all very straightforward.
It may give an
It's not
impression
very
that you would rather
straightforward.
avoid giving.
No, I want to be really full and frank with this committee, just as
Right.
you've asked me to be.
Yes.
If you look at what happened when I gave a yes-no answer to the UK committee, you have suggested that I wasn't full and frank.
Well,
And
I
now
didn't
you're
think I
trying
saw
to
a
get me
yes
to
and
give
no
very
answer.
short answers.
Mr. Milner, I will stand corrected, but I've seen your answers to the UK committee. They were very long. And
Not all of them, clearly. Some of them should have been longer.
And, well, they could have been shorter on some of the stuff that they didn't need to hear, and they could have been longer on the stuff they actually needed to hear. And the chair, at one point, I think, made a comment that you start your answers with respect, and I
It
think
wasn't this committee, that was another one, actually.
the Home Affairs Committee.
Yes.
Yes,
It wasn't the chair, it was actually one of the members.
right. Thank
He's
you
no
for
longer an
correcting
MP.
me. Now, we can go into some of the notes and what they have said. But the point is, all I'm saying to you is, if these facts had come out in 2015, the public could reasonably have asked you, expected you to have done more to make sure the data was no longer with Cambridge Analytica and Dr. Kogan. Yes or no?
I suggest to you, more questions would have been asked of Cambridge Analytica, because we would have made their names public, and Dr. Kogan. So people have asked them directly, prove you no longer have this data.
That is still not an answer to my question. The fact that questions could have been asked of Cambridge Analytica has got nothing to do with what I'm saying, which is that you, Facebook, would have been expected to have done more, reasonably. Agree?
Yes, given
Thank you.
the actions we're now
I think
taking.
it took us about 10 minutes to get there. Now, let's move on. Now, let's just remind ourselves of some things that your CEO said last night. He said that we also made mistakes, there is more to do, and we need to step up and do it. And CNN's interview says he expressed regret for not doing more to take action against Cambridge Analytica when the issue came to the company's attention in 2015. So there you have an admission that more should have been done.
Yes.
But you're not able to explain to us, in fact, why more was not done in 2015.
As I say, I don't want to speculate, but I'm happy to come back to the
Thank
committee
you.
on that.
Now let's move on to another point. The significance of what you say, user consent. Now, on the 17th of March, your statement last week, you say the claim that this is data breach is completely false. Alexander Kogan requested and gained access to information from users who chose to sign up to his app, and everyone involved gave their consent. People knowingly provided the information. Kogan gained access to this information in a legitimate way and through the proper channels that governed all developers on Facebook at that time. And in your statement on the 16th, approximately 270,000 people downloaded the app. In so doing, they gave their consent for Kogan to access information, as well as more limited information about friends who had their privacy settings set to allow it. Kogan gained access to this information in a legitimate way and through proper channels that governed all developers on Facebook at that time. This line of reasoning is not new. You accused me of being a lawyer just now. Let me...
That wasn't an accusation.
It's...
statement.
Yes,
you
I
are,
know.
right?
I know.
You were a lawyer.
I am.
You still are.
I am. I still am.
I respect.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. I wish I'd done it myself.
Right. Oh, you do better than most lawyers do. This line of reasoning is not new. Let me give you an example. The law had to deal with these sorts of issues for a long time. I go down, I take a train, I get tickets. There used to be standard forms on these tickets, which would remove all liability on the part of the train operator. They can be negligent, and I may be left without any recourse. And that's why the law intervened to equalize the position a bit more and refuse the company in a dominant position to deny all liability. It seems to me that the approach you take is very much similar to the approach that many of these utilities and other operators used to take with consumers. The individual versus a large corporation which seeks to deny all liability. Would you accept that simply to say, as you said on the 16th and 17th, oh, they clicked on an app, they must be known to know all the terms and conditions, and therefore they agreed. That's one position. Really, the more acceptable position is the acknowledgement of responsibility that came last night from your CEO and Ms. Sandberg. Would you accept that?
I think the two are entirely consistent.
You think they're entirely
I
consistent?
think Mr. Greywall's posts and what we said at the weekend are entirely consistent with what we said, with what Mr. Zuckerberg and Ms. Sandberg have said today.
So you still do not think that there is some duty on you to make sure that the Facebook users are notified more clearly and protected more vis-a-vis third-party app developers?
I think your question was a double negative. So just to be really clear, rather than a yes, no, we are absolutely accepting we have a very significant responsibility here. There are legal kind of definitional issues we do that, I certainly don't want to get into those with you because I'm sure that you've got a sharper legal mind than mine. We're very clear this is a breach of trust. There is a specific definition under law about what a data breach consequence. And one of the questions that we were being asked by journalists was, is this a data breach or not? That's what that post was referring to. We've been absolutely clear this was a significant breach of trust with our users, and we are determined to address it.
Now, let me take it from a more philosophical policy point of view. There is Facebook, 2 billion users, you are in a dominant position. Each individual user is working with you. If you take the view that you have no obligation to protect the users.
I hope you didn't hear me say that because I completely do not think that's our
Okay,
position.
let me rephrase that.
Thank you.
Maybe I should rephrase that. If you take the view that there is no data breach because, well, the users consented to the information being accessed in this way, and that therefore you bear no obligation, then we are in a situation analogous to the one that I pointed out to you just now.
I disagree.
You disagree.
I'm not going to dance on the head of a legal definitional pin about whether this is a data breach or not, or whether Facebook is responsible. We are clearly accepting responsibility in the sense of this should not have happened on our watch. We made significant mistakes. We're going to rectify those, and we're going to take action to ensure that A, this hasn't happened in respect of other apps, and if it has, we're going to deal with it and let people know, and take action to ensure this does not happen again. Those are not the actions of a company which is trying to abrogate its responsibilities. I hope you agree with that.
Well, Mr. Mulder, actions have to speak louder than words. And what we have are the actions from 2014, 2015, for which we have no reasonable explanation as yet, even as late as the 8th of February. That's a few weeks ago. What seems to me a complete denial of responsibility even as of the 8th of February, based on your...
You know I disagree with you on that.
Well, but we also
it's your
agree...
interpretation.
We also agree it's a reasonable interpretation.
I don't think you actually use those exact words. Well, and when you were trying to ask get me to agree this might be a reasonable interpretation. But let's look back at the transcript.
Right. Let's look back at the transcript. As of the 8th of February, I think at least you will agree with this. We left off that you could have been more full in your answers. And to me, a reasonable person will go away after reading your transcript saying that you are not coming up front with what had happened. Okay. So if you ask me for my view, those are your actions.
But those are my words, not my actions.
Your words and actions. I mean, if you go and testify in a certain way and take a certain position, that indicates what you were thinking then.
But you suggested that actions are more important than words.
Let me finish.
It's all about the actions we're going to take and we are taking now.
Let me finish. yes, there is a difference between words, statements of intention, and actions, but sometimes your statements to people are also indicative of your conduct. And therefore, one puts together a sequence. Breach occurred in 2014. You knew about it by 2015. It was a major breach of trust on your part. It was a major breach of your policies. You didn't go public. You didn't tell the users. You did nothing vis-a-vis your users.
Actually, we did do something, didn't we? Because we...
You prevented other developers.
Oh, no, we prevented other developers. We also
But
took
you didn't
down...
tell.
we took
Let me
down that
rephrase
app.
it.
We
You
took-
didn't
we
tell
got
the users.
undertakings from these individuals that they deleted.
I
it.
haven't
So we
finished.
didn't do nothing. To suggest we did nothing is
Let me
it's not fair.
rephrase. Let me rephrase. So in 2014, there's a major breach. 2015, at the latest, you find out it's a breach or major breach of trust on your part to your users.
And breach of our terms.
And breach of your terms. I know you were very keen to add that in.
Well, it's
Don't
very
worry, what
important.
I say will
It's
not
very
bind
important.
you. I was going to say that.
Sorry.
And a breach of your policies, as you put it. You do not inform the users, which is very odd and inexplicable, and one would say inexcusable. You do not tell the public about it. You take the words of someone who has already acted in breach with a certification. You do nothing to verify that the data has been deleted. And it's contrary to everything you have stated about the importance of protecting data and protecting users' data. We then fast forward through last year, nothing. This year, UK Parliament, questions are asked. From my perspective, those questions were capable of being answered only in one way, which is to come out with the truth. And that didn't happen. This is my view. You asked for my view.
No, I disagree with that.
Yes, I know you do. So you ask me what we think. Well, we'll have to wait and see what you do. But these are your actions so far.
I think that's very fair of you to say we'll have to wait and see. Just because we've said we're going to do all these things, you should hold us to account. And that's one of the reasons although this has been a tough Q&A, I respect that you are asking questions that need to be answered, and that we as a company need to be accountable to you and your colleagues and to other policymakers, and most importantly, the community of 2.2 billion people, including some 4.1 million people here in Singapore, about how we protect their data, how we keep it secure, and when things go wrong, how we tell them about it and how we tell you about it.
Now, looking at those facts that I've just put to you, would you say as of now, well, judgment will depend on what you may do in the future. As of now, your professed desire to regulate yourself rings a little hollow?
We've never suggested we want to regulate ourselves.
Well,
In fact, in respect of data, of course, we are actually highly regulated.
Well, I think you are smart enough to understand what I'm saying.
Actually, I'm genuinely not. I do not recall us ever saying we can regulate ourselves. If you have a quote to that effect, please share it with me.
Well,
I certainly have never said that.
You may not have used those phrases, but if you look at what Facebook has said, including the written representations, the essence of your statements is that your internal guidelines will govern you, and they are adequate, and there doesn't need to be any legislation. Would you accept that as a fair summary of your position?
In respect to the specific issue of deliberate online falsehoods, like others on this panel,
Right.
we are not convinced that legislation is a silver bullet.
Right. But for privacy, you are.
No.
you're not convinced?
We don't think there is, rather like you and indeed the chair have suggested, this is a multifaceted problem which requires a multifaceted solution.
Right.
We are not yet convinced, but we're very happy to be part of this dialogue as to the role that new legislation here in Singapore will play or needs to play in respect of addressing this issue. And I'm very happy to give very full, frank, long answers to questions about those multifaceted approaches.
Right. Maybe you can then give me the context to, I'm sure you will be able to, Mr. Zuckerberg's statement saying, I'm not sure we shouldn't be regulated. Double negative. But there are things like ad transparency regulation that I would love to see.
Yes.
So could you explain that?
So as he's made clear, and indeed we have in other contexts, we do think there is absolutely a valuable role for regulation in a range of areas to provide certainty for consumers, first and foremost, to help companies know how to operate in a particular jurisdiction. There are all kinds of reasons why regulation can be helpful. It's the specific question of when it comes to deliberate online falsehoods, what role new regulations might, and what value they might have. That's the specific issue. So it's not a general statement about, hey, don't regulate us, where everything's fine here. It's absolutely not that. It's very, very specific and narrow to the issue before this committee.
Right. So in principle, you see a role for regulation, but where it applies is a question to be discussed.
Where and how and where you draw the line, all kinds of issues like that, as you're very expert in, and we want to have a dialogue with you on, and your colleagues.
And we have been having a dialogue with you. Now, let's look at deliberate online falsehoods. And so that you have the context, I want to put some context to you and take you and the panel through some of the issues that have been presented to us. And I'll try and do it at a faster clip. This is really evidence that has been presented to the Select Committee. First, starting with national security, there were discussions on how deliberate online falsehoods can be used to impact national security. So let me take you through some of the points. We will give you the documents to make it easier for you. Okay. This, again, Mr. Milner, is really to give you the context in which we are discussing the issues, not so much that you agree or disagree. The evidence we have received, for example, much more than this, but in bullet points, information warfare threatens a state's national security and sovereignty. It is an established part of military arsenal, has become just as important as conventional kinetic warfare. And so that if you wanted to check, I've given you various transcript references and the people who have said these things, but by no means the only people who have said this. It's persistent, permanent, takes place all the time, even in the absence of open conflict. Costs and manpower needed are disproportionately low, and therefore it is an attractive option. They are highly effective and
So can you just explain what that's in reference to? When it says, why is this such an attractive option, what's it referring to?
Although that's a heading and the points are below.
But so when it says the cost of manpower of what?
Right, okay.
Of disinformation, it means, of deliberate,
Yes,
oh, sorry. I thought
exactly.
it was meaning in terms of legislation, I understand.
Yes.
That. I apologize.
So this is all about, I'm giving you the context for deliberate online falsehoods, just so that you're not mistaken. If we go back to the first page, prevalence of disinformation campaigns, why it is attractive. Yeah. And disinformation campaigns are highly effective and reduce the need to deploy military power, carry a lower risk of detection. Disinformation campaigns can be so subtle and obscure that a state may not know that it is being attacked. They can reside in our system long before we detect it. One would assume that any large country would have started developing their own capabilities. various states, Russia, China, US, North Korea, have openly declared that they have these capabilities as part of their arsenal. These are also attractive options for smaller countries or countries without strong military capabilities as a form of asymmetric warfare. There is a proliferation of commercial entities who offer their expertise for sale to the highest bidder. And we see an interesting name there, Cambridge Analytica. And if you read the Straits Times, I think it seems to be, I didn't read the article, but it seems like every political party in Malaysia is saying we have nothing to do with them. Disinformation campaigns can have real-world consequences and influence events in real time. They aim to weaken and destabilize target societies psychologically and aim to reduce the will to fight. They try to sow discord, try to destroy trust between communities, groups, deepen fractures, exploit tensions by working on groups at both ends of the spectrum and pushing them further apart. And you see some examples there in US, in Ukraine. And they seek to sow discord between communities and governments and key institutions, including the police, religious institutions. And you know the Texas, I'm sure you know the Texan example, and the Pizzagate, of course, and Jenna Abrams, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And Singapore's own position that it can be a sandbox for subversion, and it's a mistake to assume that these attacks are not already happening. And sources and drivers for information warfare are deeply embedded in our regional security conflicts, and we are an attractive target for cyber warfare. Means and tools for information warfare are readily available. They can be easily turned against Singapore by both state actors and/or non-state actors. And there are cyber armies in Malaysia and Indonesia, and these techniques are being used in some of our neighbors. So that's some of the evidence on national security issues. Then let me take you to a little bit more. Again, I'm trying to summarize for you 3 days worth of evidence. This is on how people absorb information. Let me just get my notes. This really deals with our biases, the way people think. Again, much of it would not be new to you, but you have been given a document, I hope, that people use mental shortcuts to process information because there is information overload and people cannot verify every single piece of information sent to them. Our mental shortcuts are called heuristic tendencies. And there are a number of mental shortcuts that we use. Confirmation bias, which is explained in a little more detail in the notes. Motivated reasoning, illusory truth effect, negativity bias, conformity cascades, informational cascades, optimism bias. The truth is weak, or at least weaker than some of the sexy falsehoods, does not travel as easily as falsehoods. And if you look at consequences, disinformation campaigns can have real-world consequences. They aim to weaken and destabilize target societies psychologically, aim to reduce the will to fight. As a result, troops can march in and annex parts of a country and thousands of lives can be lost. Do you have the document? I'm sorry. My apologies. It's headed Consequences. Just to be clear, the first document referred to the national security angle. The second document you were given relates to how people absorb information. those psychological imperatives. And the third document deals with some of the consequences. Right. And the point is they can have real-world consequences. They aim to destabilize, target societies psychologically, aim to reduce the will to fight. In Europe, disinformation campaign against migrants. Because of that, it has become very difficult to debate migration issues to find a solution. In the Czech Republic, 1/4 to 1/3 of the Czech population believe that the Ukrainian government is run by fascists because of DOFs targeted at the Czech population, and therefore the Czech government can't even render humanitarian assistance to Ukraine if they wanted to. Now, this is the evidence that we were given. I'm just putting some of the points to you. Right. Disinformation can cause serious violence. One of the examples we were given is, because of rumors, a father sending food to his children was beaten to death, mistaken for a kidnapper. But this won't be new to you. Many such instances around the world. Trust in institutions can be eroded through DOFs. Trust in the police can be eroded. You know the Black Lives Matter and the falsehoods that were used to exacerbate distrust between African Americans and the police. It spreads misinformation and corrodes democracy. And DOFs make it more difficult to assess and discuss key socio-political issues, including, we have given you some examples from Indonesia, other places, none of which would be new. Would you agree, Mr. Milner, that at its worst, social media allows people to spread falsehoods and corrode democracy?
Yes.
Thank you. And I want you to be clear that we are dealing here with not shades of opinion, but deliberate online falsehoods, which are online. And to give you a few examples of what we are talking about, I'm sure you're aware of the famous example where University of Washington researchers produced a realistic video of President Obama making a speech, but they used AI to precisely imitate how he moved his mouth, but make a different speech. You're aware of that, correct?
I am aware of the example, yes.
Thank you. Likewise, President Jokowi, one of the presenters this morning pointed out falsehoods that he is Chinese and Christian, he and his family. You can imagine the impact in a country where the Chinese and Christian population have not often held the highest public office, what such falsehoods can do. And the previous Jakarta governor, if you look at this Nikkei Asian Review article, there was a doctored video of Ahok delivering an allegedly anti-Islam speech that went viral. Rumors that the Indonesian Democratic Party of Struggle that backed Ahok was linked to the Communist Party of China, and fake news that 10 million Chinese workers were taking over locals' jobs. And that had real-world consequences, rallies involving hundreds of thousands of Muslims protesting against the governor and demanding his arrest. And you're aware of the famous example of Mrs. Clinton and the pedophilia ring that she was supposed to have been running. And you know that the restaurant's owners and staff were harassed and threatened, and a man brought a rifle to the restaurant and opened fire as well. You're aware of that. Likewise, the allegations that Mrs. Clinton sold weapons to ISIS. And I don't know if you're aware of a study by Ohio State University which concluded that misinformation did have significant effect among a particular subset of voters, supporters of President Obama in the 2012 elections. The nationwide survey conducted in December 2016, January 2017, analyzed the 2016 voter behavior. And it seems like 35% of the national sample believed that Mrs. Clinton had approved weapon sales to Islamic jihadists, including ISIS, as did 20% of former Obama voters. And that's one aspect. And of course, another aspect of DOFs are DOFs being multiplied through the mix of platforms using bots and avatars and targeted campaigns. I know bots doesn't apply specifically to you, but I'm talking about a mix of platforms. And you must be aware of the IRA and the Internet Research Agency and the Twitter account it ran, impersonating, for example, in this situation, the Tennessee Republican Party. You're aware of that? It's Twitter, I know, but I'm asking you.
Actually, I'm not aware of that particular case, but I am of many of the others you've described.
Okay, but it's a useful one to look through. A Russian troll account impersonated the Tennessee Republican Party on Twitter and repeatedly sent out inflammatory falsehoods. The actual Tennessee Republican Party notified 3 times between September 2016 and August 2017 that the account was fake before Twitter finally closed down the account. Some examples of the inflammatory material that was posted included claims that unarmed black men killed by police officers deserved their fate, anti-immigrant messages, anti-Muslim messages, anti-Obama falsehoods that the president had admitted his Muslim faith, anti-Democrat conspiracy theories that a mysterious explosion in Washington, D.C. killed an employee of the DNC and the death was linked to Mrs. Clinton, claimed that a photo of the Cleveland Cavaliers NBA championship parade was actually a crowd waiting to hear Mr. Trump speak. The fake account gained 152,000 followers, posted nearly 11,000 tweets and retweets. Original tweets from this account received more than 67 million impressions within the first 7 days after posting. This was given in testimony to the Senate committee on which conducted some hearings in October. And you've got to compare that to the markedly lower following for the authentic Twitter account of the Tennessee Republican Party. Followers, 13,800. Tweets or retweets, 8,700. 200 were original tweets that received 240,000 impressions. In fact, the fake account appeared so authentic that the tweets were inadvertently amplified by retweets from Ms. Conway, Mr. Donald Trump Jr., and now President Trump himself. And you can understand how such data can be amplified through the use of multiple platforms, including Facebook, correct?
Actually, I don't know in respect of this. I've never seen this information before.
I'm asking you that as a general possibility that such falsehoods originating from Twitter can go onto Facebook and
Correct.
travel. Right. And if you wanted an actual example, I'm sure you're aware of the example of His Holiness the Pope supposedly endorsing the president, which was then started on Twitter, but then was amplified on Facebook. You're aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware of that case.
Thank you. And I think that article received close to 1 million Facebook engagements and interactions. Does that sound about right to you?
I'd have to verify that. That doesn't mean everybody was saying this is true.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I also want to share with you and get your views, and anyone else on the panel, if you have any views, please let us know, how these sorts of sharing and resharing and cascading works. Just show you a couple of tables on the screen. Can we have the diagram up? I've skipped the actual case. This relates to a fake account set up supposedly by a foreign power from the outside of the US. And it cascaded information through these ways. The main question I have for you is, this wouldn't surprise you that information travels in this way. You agree?
I really can't answer that because it's about Twitter. I think they should answer this question.
Well,
Please.
I'm asking you a
Please.
broader question.
No.
The broader question.
I have no experience of the Twitter platform, so I really don't think it's reasonable for me to speculate, but I'm sure they could give you a definitive answer.
Well, it's a simple question, but I respect that you don't want to answer it. Would Twitter, Ms. Mary Reen, the question is a simple one, that these sorts of sharings and traveling of information across platforms will not be unusual. Agree?
Agree.
Thank you. It wouldn't strike you as being odd, would it, Mr. Milner, that when you see I'm sorry I come back to you.
I grew my beard specially so you wouldn't be able to see me. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be. I know this is serious.
No, that's fine.
So, Nancy. What's the question?
The question is, it wouldn't strike you as unusual to see a chart like this and information traveling in this way?
Actually, I've never seen a chart like that, but
Right.
of course it seems perfectly sensible based on what you've described.
Thank you. Now, the kind of falsehoods we have talked about, where President Obama's words are reworked with artificial intelligence and he's shown to be making a speech that he did not, or the Jakarta governor is said to be making an anti-Islamic speech based on a doctored video, or that President Obama has accepted that he is a Muslim, or that Mrs. Clinton sold or runs a pedophilia ring. Do you think that these sorts of falsehoods should be allowed to be circulated?
I think we really have to work hard to address them.
That wasn't the question.
I'm not sure quite what you mean by saying should they be allowed to be circulated. As in,
Should
should
we
they be
do-
against the law?
should we do-
Do you mean should they be against the law?
Well, let me ask you a more general. I know that you don't want to get there.
I do want to get there,
Yeah.
but I also want to get there in a way which is not based on yes/no answers.
Right. Let's take it as a general proposition first. We should do everything we can, and I'm sure you know what I'm going to ask you, but we should do everything we can to stop such falsehoods from circulating. Would you accept that?
I agree that they do not contribute to good, healthy public discourse, and therefore we should be doing everything we can to address them, and indeed we are doing lots as a company, which we're happy to explain.
In this case, when I said we, I included you, but was not specific to you. I meant you and us.
Yes, I agree. I think it's a
Thank
shared
you.
responsibility.
Thank you. But Facebook's position as of now is that you don't have a duty to take down these falsehoods, correct?
It depends on, there are different examples there. Misrepresentation of someone, so if you like impersonation, absolutely. We don't allow impersonation on Facebook and we will take down that content.
What about an allegation that Mrs. Clinton runs a pedophilia ring? Is that something that you think you have a duty to take down?
I think that is where you get into really.
No, I just want.
I do not think it's fair just to say yes or no to something like that. I'm afraid to say there are sometimes rumors that become the truth, and I'm absolutely not suggesting that's true in this case. But there are rumors that become the truth, and if we were to say you can't publish things which are untrue about Hillary Clinton, how do we know? Until somebody is able to help us in respect to that. So this is one of the really difficult things here. And some of the examples you're showing are the kind of things that no reasonable person would believe. But often these things are not as clear-cut as you're suggesting.
Well, Mr. Milner, there are three parts to this. You are very anxious to answer questions that I haven't asked.
I'm genuinely trying to help you rather than just give
let me
simple,
try and
short
help you
answers.
help me.
Of course.
Let
Happy
me
to.
try again. There are three parts to this. One, if they are falsehoods, should they be taken down? Two, let me finish. Two, how do you know they are falsehoods? And 3, rumors can become or be shown to be true later on. Now, the second 2 may be reasons why you hold on to a position that you won't take it down. But my question is simply this. For whatever reasons, and we're not saying they're bad reasons, we're not saying they're good reasons. For whatever reasons, and I'm sure you have your reasons, your position is that you will not take them down.
Our position is we do not have a policy that says everything posted on Facebook has to be true and verified and accurate.
Right. And the reverse of that is, even if it is untrue, and even if it's false, therefore you will not take it down.
I think that's a really narrow interpretation that you're putting onto it in order to try to get me into a corner, which I don't think is fair.
No. I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
No, so is it that you will take down falsehoods, or is it that you will not take down falsehoods? That's all I'm trying to understand.
I understand.
Help me, please.
So we do not have a policy that says everything has to be true, and we do not put ourselves in the position of deciding what is true.
Right. So the logical conclusion of those 2 statements is that because something is false, doesn't mean that you will take it down.
Actually, just to be clear, if it's an inauthentic account, we will take it
We
down.
leave out fake accounts. I know
It's
you go on.
it's a very big and important factor here.
We leave that aside for the time being. That's not the focus of my question. I know that was dealt with at some length, both in UK and elsewhere. We'll come to that if necessary. That's why I set the context for you. I said we are dealing with falsehoods, DOF. I explained the national security context. I talked about the consequences so that we are all on the same page. I've given you some examples. I think you have given me an answer, but based on your earlier answer that you do not verify whether something is true or untrue, and you do not have a policy of keeping up only what is true, I think it's much easier for both of us to move on.
You're correct. We do not have a policy that you can only post things which are true on Facebook.
And the reverse of that is, even if something is shown to be false, your policy does not require it to be taken down.
It depends. Okay. If it's shown to be false, for instance, through a court process and we get a court order,
right,
then we can and will respect that court order.
Okay, so that's helpful.
So there's an interesting question about who determines what is false and
that
what
is helpful.
True.
So if there is a court order, you will take down falsehoods?
If we get a court order telling us that something is locally illegal, we will act on that court order.
That wasn't my question. Let's keep to the specifics. If you get a court order that something is false, will you take it down?
If we get a court order telling us that something is locally illegal, we will take it down. That's as far as I can go.
That's as far as you can go. So if fake or falsehood is defined as illegal, then you will be prepared to comply with the court order.
We respect local law and will address it.
Now, of course, courts can only act based on legislation. You realize that?
I do realize that, and I understand
Right.
where you're heading.
I did say many times that you're a very smart person. Now, do you not realize then that the natural and logical conclusion based on your policy that you will not yourself take down falsehoods unless there is a court order, combined with the fact that court orders can only be given pursuant to legislation, means that if a state wants falsehoods to be taken down, that can only be done through legislation vis-a-vis Facebook.
I understand.
So you know, right? You knew all along.
I understand why you reached that logical conclusion. What we are respectfully suggesting is that
That word respect again.
It's the only time I've used it. Respectfully suggesting that defining that law and in particular, figuring out where do you draw the line in terms of really understanding what is a deliberate online falsehood as opposed to a non-deliberate online falsehood, or and there's a range of other things. And I know in terms of some of the expert witnesses you've had, including Carol Soon, who've talked about this incredible, this really quite broad spectrum of the types of things we're talking about here. How you define in law, and that's clearly a matter for you. We know you are more expert than us on this. How you define in law what is a DOF compared to what is not, we think is tremendously difficult. And therefore, hence our view that we're skeptical about that. But that doesn't mean we're therefore not doing anything about it.
Right.
So just because we do not have a policy that says everything on Facebook has to be true, so that we're not put in the position of being the arbiter of the truth, we are nonetheless taking lots of steps, as you've seen in our submission, as are other companies represented here, to address this issue, because we absolutely agree with the analysis that's been presented to this committee and that you have shared with us. This is a big problem. There are national security concerns. There are concerns about the fabric of society, including this multiracial, multicultural, multi-religious community of Singapore, which I'm delighted. 2 days ago, I got my employment pass. I'm now legal. I've seen this in action, and I know it's a real concern, and we absolutely share your concern. We know you have certain responsibilities, as do we. We're here to talk about all those, and we're just saying we're concerned about a rush to legislate, and that legislation which is enacted in haste can often be regretted at length.
Yes.
So that's what we're suggesting, is we just need to be really careful about how this gets done. And I'm sure, given the carefulness with which you've interrogated me today, you will be.
That sounds more like a threat, but anyway.
It was a genuine praise, genuinely respectful praise.
Thank you.
This is really hard, really hard. Lots of other policymakers are trying to grapple with it. What we want to do as a set of companies is explain what we are doing to play our part. And yes, we have all taken the view that actually trying to figure out how you make operable a policy that says you can only post things that are true will be so hard that it's better that we focus on other things rather than try to do that.
Well, I think if you define the problem that way, that you only post or only allow posting of what is true, then in some senses that's a straw man argument, because that's not how one will approach the problem. But let me come back to where I think there is common ground. Facebook, understandably, and I can understand the same is true of the others, don't want to be the arbiters of what is true and what is not true. But you will comply with legislation or a court order. So the real question, and your concerns, not the real question, your concerns are how are we going to define this problem? That I'm going to take up a suggestion that you made earlier, that you are not as expert as the lawyers, and therefore leave it to the lawyers to come up with a solution on how you define the problem. But of course, in making it workable, because we do want you to have your business running and doing well, to make it workable, we will need to discuss with you, sit with you, and see how it works. And can I assume that we will have your cooperation in that exercise?
Absolutely, I regard this as part of that.
Thank you.
But that doesn't mean necessarily because we think it's the best course of action. But,
I
we
understand the
always
caveats.
want to be part of that dialogue. And look, not every country operates in this way. Not every country is consultative. And so one of the things I've certainly learned from Mr. Tan, my colleague, who I know would love to talk more about what we're doing here in Singapore, is that...
Are you suggesting that I direct my questions to him rather than you?
I think that actually one of the things about this country I've seen already in my short time here is this is a place where we want to have a national dialogue about issues of real concern to the people of Singapore. You are the leaders. You've called us here to figure out how we can help you, and that's exactly what we want to do as you grapple, you grappling with the problem, we're grappling with it at a global level.
Mr. Milner, you've been answering questions for 2 hours. Do you need a short break for a coffee before we restart, or are you quite happy to carry on?
How much longer do you think we're going to go on for? Because that will determine my answer to your question. It's not a
I
yes/no
think
answer.
we are about halfway through.
Minister,
I think a comfort break would be
if
very
I may
much appreciated.
supplement also, Mr. Milner.
I'll be happy to ask questions, but let me consult with the channel.
Thank you.
We'll give you a 15 minutes break to have a coffee or a double espresso or something.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I adjourn this session for a short break, 15 minutes. We'll be back here in 15 minutes.